Captain Luke Tanner stood before the Galactic Council, an imposing panel of alien leaders, each draped in the insignia of their species. They regarded him with contempt, a mere human, in their eyes weak and disposable. "The mission is simple," one of the council members said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You will be sent to Zanarka, a planet that no one has survived. If, by some miracle, you return, we'll reconsider humanity's value." Luke's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. He knew what this was, a death sentence, wrapped in false diplomacy. Zanarka was infamous for its deadly terrain and monstrous beasts. No being had lasted more than a day on its surface. The council smirked at his lack of protest. "So, you agree?" one of the counselors taunted. Luke nodded once. "I'll return." Laughter echoed in the grand chamber as they dismissed him. To them, he was already dead. But Luke had learned long ago that words were cheap. He'd prove them wrong with action. Within hours, Luke's ship was launched toward Zanarka. The council barely paid attention as the small craft disappeared into the void. In their eyes, the mission was over before it began. As Luke entered the atmosphere of the hostile planet, his instruments screamed warnings of violent winds and volatile conditions. Zanarka welcomed him with a landscape that seemed determined to kill. Jagged mountains, lightning-filled skies, and a deep, oppressive heat greeted him as the ship landed with a thud. Stepping out of the craft, he surveyed the surroundings. The air smelled of sulfur, and in the distance, monstrous roars pierced the sky. His heart pounded in his chest, but his face remained stoic. This was no different than the countless survival missions he had trained for back on Earth. The Galactic Council might not understand humans, but they would soon. Luke wasted no time. He found shelter among the rocks and began setting traps. He knew the beasts would come, and he needed to be ready. His movements were methodical, drawing on every lesson learned from Earth's harshest environments. Zanarka was deadly, but so was humanity's will to survive. Hours passed, and then the ground began to shake. The first beast arrived, a towering creature with 6 legs, razor-sharp claws, and eyes glowing in the darkness. It charged without hesitation, intent on devouring the strange intruder. Luke didn't flinch. Instead, he stood his ground, allowing the beast to get close. At the last moment, he triggered the trap, a sharp metallic net ensnared the creature, pinning it to the ground. It roared and thrashed, but Luke approached calmly, observing. He could see the intelligence behind its wild eyes, and something more, fear. This creature, feared by the galaxy, was not a mindless killer. It was fighting for survival, just like him. Luke knelt beside the beast and whispered, "We're not so different, are we?" For hours, he stayed near the trapped creature, offering it food and water. Slowly, its violent thrashing ceased. Its breathing calmed, and it began to understand that this human wasn't a threat. Luke released the net cautiously, stepping back. The beast didn't attack. It watched him, curious, as he moved away. Days passed, and Luke encountered more of Zanarka's beasts. Each encounter tested his limits, but each time, he learned more. His patience, observation, and unwillingness to give up allowed him to build a fragile trust with these creatures. They weren't mindless monsters, they were pack animals, and Luke had found his way into their ranks. The first beast he had encountered, now free, began following him. Soon, more joined. Luke wasn't just surviving Zanarka anymore, he was mastering it. The beasts, which had killed every other being sent to the planet, now moved in harmony with him. He stood on a ridge overlooking the desolate landscape, a pack of Zanarkan beasts at his side. The Galactic Council had underestimated him. They had underestimated all humans. He wasn't just coming back, he was coming back with an army. Luke moved quickly, adapting to Zanarka's unforgiving environment. The air was thick with moisture, and every step felt like a battle against the terrain. Sharp rocks, poisonous plants, and hidden sinkholes threatened his survival at every turn. But he had been trained for conditions like these. His eyes scanned the horizon, searching for resources and signs of danger. The first night was brutal. Howling winds whipped through his makeshift shelter, and distant roars echoed across the darkened sky. Sleep was impossible. Instead, he focused on preparing for what was to come. He crafted weapons from the materials around him, sharp rocks tied to sturdy branches, basic traps set along his perimeter. Every move was calculated. Then, he heard it, a low growl, deep and menacing. The first beast had found him. It emerged from the shadows, a hulking creature covered in thick, matted fur, its eyes glowing with a predatory glint. Luke stood his ground, heart pounding. The beast circled him, muscles tensed, ready to strike. Instead of reacting in fear, Luke crouched slowly, making himself appear smaller, less threatening. He reached into his pack and tossed a piece of dried meat toward the creature. It hesitated, sniffing the air cautiously. After what felt like an eternity, it lunged forward, not at Luke, but at the food. It devoured the offering with fierce hunger before retreating slightly, still watching him closely. Luke kept his movements slow and deliberate, tossing more food. Each time, the beast edged closer, less wary. Hours passed, and by the time the sun began to rise, the creature had settled a few feet from him, no longer seeing him as an immediate threat. Luke knew he had made the first step toward something more. In the following days, the planet's challenges only intensified. The heat grew more oppressive, the storms more violent. But Luke pushed on, finding water sources, marking safe routes, and honing his instincts. The beasts became a constant presence, stalking him from the shadows, testing him. But he was ready for them now. He'd observed their patterns, their behavior. They were intelligent, far more than the Galactic Council had believed. One night, while setting up camp, another beast approached, this one larger, fiercer, and clearly the leader of the pack. Its eyes locked onto Luke's, and for a moment, everything was still. Then it charged. Luke barely had time to react, diving to the side as the beast barreled past. It turned quickly, teeth bared, ready to strike again. But Luke didn't run. He stood his ground, meeting the beast's gaze with unwavering calm. He reached out his hand, palm open, and waited. The beast snarled but didn't attack. Slowly, cautiously, it approached, sniffing at Luke's outstretched hand. And then, in a moment that would change everything, it lowered its head in a gesture of submission. From that point on, Luke wasn't alone. The alpha beast became his companion, never straying far from his side. It protected him from other threats, guiding him through the treacherous terrain. Luke knew he had gained more than just an ally, he had earned the respect of Xenarca's deadliest creatures. The Galactic Council had expected him to die here. But instead, he had found a way to live, not through brute force, but through understanding. He had become one with the planet and its beasts. And soon, he would return with proof that humans were far more than the galaxy believed. Luke's control over the beasts grew stronger with each passing day. The Alpha was now fully loyal, never leaving his side, and the others followed suit. He could sense their pack mentality, the way they deferred to the Alpha and how they responded to him, now recognized as part of their hierarchy. Every interaction strengthened their bond. He wasn't just surviving with them, he was communicating. He tested commands, gestures, and sounds, watching how they reacted. Soon, they followed his lead, hunting when he signaled, defending when he commanded. Luke's patience and understanding had turned Xenarca's greatest predators into allies. He began to explore further into the planet's wild, untamed regions. The beasts, once obstacles to his survival, were now his greatest asset. They helped him navigate dangerous areas, their instincts sharper than any technology. When other predators appeared, the pack stood firm, protecting him without hesitation. Luke no longer feared the planet, he owned it. The first time he commanded the Alpha to attack, it was a test. A massive, rival beast had approached, clearly a threat. Luke motioned toward the intruder, a simple gesture with his hand. The Alpha didn't hesitate. It lunged, tearing into the rival with precision and fury, its pack following behind in perfect sync. The fight was over in seconds, and Luke knew then, he had mastered them. But it wasn't just the planet that was changing. Luke felt the shift within himself. Every day spent commanding the beasts solidified his confidence. The Galactic Council had sent him here to die, but they had unknowingly given him the greatest opportunity. He wasn't just surviving this impossible mission, he was thriving, reshaping the very nature of what the galaxy understood about power. The beasts responded to him not out of fear, but respect. He had earned their loyalty, and they were now a part of him as much as he was a part of them. He trained them further, pushing the limits of their intelligence. They learned to follow his lead, recognizing his cues without hesitation. He was no longer an outsider, he was the pack leader. Luke's mind began to shift from mere survival to strategy. He started thinking about his return. The Galactic Council, so sure of their superiority, had no idea what awaited them. He imagined their faces when they saw him again, flanked by the very creatures they feared. They had underestimated him, underestimated humanity's capacity to adapt and dominate. By now, his presence on Xenarca had fundamentally changed the planet's dynamics. The once deadly beasts had become part of his survival arsenal. They protected him, hunted for him, even trusted him to lead them into battle. Luke was no longer just a man on a hostile planet, he was a commander with an army of the galaxy's most feared predators. It was time to return. The beasts followed him to the ship without hesitation, and Luke couldn't help but smirk at the thought of what came next. He wasn't the same man who had landed on this planet. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. Luke's ship entered the atmosphere of the Galactic Council's home world with a silent intensity. He hadn't bothered sending any communication ahead. Let them be surprised. He could imagine the panic that would follow once they realized he had survived. The pack of Xenarcan beasts, loyal and obedient, moved with him, their eyes alert and ready. As the ship landed on the Council's central platform, a crowd had already gathered, including the same Council members who had dismissed him as nothing more than a disposable pawn. Their arrogance was gone, replaced by disbelief and fear. Whispers rippled through the onlookers as they saw Luke emerge, flanked by the beasts. The massive creatures moved in sync with him, their presence alone sending waves of terror through the alien assembly. The Council stood frozen. No one had expected him to return, let alone with the very creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. Luke walked forward, each step purposeful, the pack behind him moving like a well-trained military unit. His gaze never left the Council, who watched in stunned silence. "You sent me to die," Luke said, his voice calm but carrying a weight that silenced the murmurs around him. "Instead, I return with the beasts you feared." The Council members exchanged nervous glances. One of them, the same who had mocked him before his departure, stepped forward, trying to regain control of the situation. You survived. But this doesn't change anything. We still control." Luke raised his hand, and the alpha beast growled, cutting the counselor off. The rest of the pack followed suit, their eyes trained on the counselor. Luke didn't have to say a word. The message was clear, he was in control now. "I didn't survive because of your tests," Luke continued, his voice unwavering. "I thrived because humanity adapts. We don't just survive the impossible, we conquer it." The counselor, now visibly shaken, stepped back, his bravado crumbling. The crowd, once filled with doubt, now stared in awe. The beasts, calm and composed at Luke's side, were a living testament to his mastery of the unmasterable. He had done what no other being in the galaxy had managed. Luke took another step forward, his gaze still fixed on the Council. "You thought Xenarca would kill me. You thought I was expendable. Now, you see the truth, humans are not weak. We're the ultimate predators." One of the Council members, a high-ranking official with a reputation for ruthlessness, tried to save face. "You've returned, yes. But this alliance with beasts, what do you plan to do with them?" Luke allowed himself a slight smirk. "That depends. What's the Council's next move?" There was silence. None of them could answer. The power had shifted, and everyone knew it. Luke had turned their challenge into his triumph, and now, the entire galaxy would hear of it. The Council, once so confident in their control, stood powerless before the man they had dismissed. Luke glanced at the beasts beside him. They stood still, awaiting his command, trusting him completely. He had turned the galaxy's most dangerous creatures into allies. No longer was he the one at the mercy of the Council's whims. Now, they were the ones facing an unstoppable force. Without another word, Luke turned and walked back toward his ship, the beasts following in perfect formation. The Council remained frozen, their silence a testament to their defeat. Luke had proven, once and for all, that humans were not to be underestimated. As he ascended the ramp into his ship, Luke couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He had not only survived, he had returned stronger than they could have ever imagined. The beasts, once their terror, were now his greatest weapon. Luke sat in the cockpit, watching the Galactic Council's planet shrink in the distance. He had made his point, and they would never forget it. But this was just the beginning. The beasts sat calmly around him, loyal and fierce, waiting for their next command. Zanarka had been conquered, and now the galaxy awaited. He knew word of his return would spread fast. Soon, every major power in the galaxy would hear of the human who survived the impossible, who commanded the monsters of Zanarka like pets. They would want to know how he did it, what secrets he held. Some would fear him, others would try to manipulate him. Luke smiled. Let them try. In the days that followed, messages flooded his communication systems. Some came from curious leaders, others from powerful factions offering alliances. They were cautious in their wording, trying to appear friendly while masking their fear. Everyone wanted a piece of the power Luke now represented. Everyone wanted control over the beasts. But Luke wasn't interested in playing their games. He had no intention of letting the galaxy's politicians dictate his next move. Humanity had been treated as a lesser species for too long, and now, he had the leverage to change everything. The beasts were just the beginning. He opened one of the messages, this one from a military coalition known for its aggressive expansion across star systems. They offered him wealth, influence, and resources beyond what any human had ever seen, if he would share his control over the beasts. Luke chuckled, deleting the message without responding. They didn't understand. It wasn't about power or riches. It was about showing the galaxy what humans were truly capable of. Luke's thoughts turned to Earth. He hadn't been there in years, having spent most of his life on distant outposts and space stations. The Galactic Council had used Earth as a bargaining chip, keeping it subjugated under the guise of interstellar protection. But now, Luke had the means to change that. Earth didn't need protection. It needed to rise, and Luke was ready to lead the way. He adjusted the ship's coordinates, setting a course for the Terran sector. The beasts moved to their resting spots, sensing the shift in his energy. Luke's connection with them had deepened over time, their instincts intertwined with his. They trusted him implicitly, and he understood their needs, their purpose. They weren't just tools of war, they were his companions, his allies in the mission ahead. As the ship sped through the vastness of space, Luke's mind began planning. The galaxy thought it could control humanity by suppressing its potential, keeping it under constant watch. But Luke had seen the truth. Humanity wasn't weak. It was adaptable, relentless, and when pushed, it became unstoppable. The beasts were proof of that. He knew his return to Earth would spark questions, and likely, opposition from those who feared change. But Luke wasn't concerned. He had faced the deadliest planet in the galaxy and tamed its fiercest creatures. No council, no military force, no alien empire could stand in his way now. Luke imagined the look on the faces of Earth's leaders when he arrived. They had bowed to the Galactic Council's demands for too long, cowering under threats of annihilation. But Luke would show them a new path. Earth wasn't just a member of the galactic community, it was destined to lead it. With the beasts by his side, he would make sure of it. The stars blurred past as the ship picked up speed, the Terran sector getting closer with each passing moment. Luke's pulse quickened. He was ready to return, ready to show the galaxy that humans weren't just survivors, they were conquerors. And the beasts were coming with him.